Now we can create the somewhat large pineapple on the side of the box. And to do that, we're going to duplicate one of the pineapples that we created, be it the sprinkled one or the top front logos one. They're both the same, so it doesn't really matter. Let's just do the top front logos group. So right click on it, duplicate. And of course, just like previous, we have errors with the duplication process. They're all set to diffuse. We don't want that. So I'm going to do this and speed up the video here. Okay, so now I have everything fixed. Let's go ahead and unhide this layer. It should show up on the top left there, of course. And now what we want to do is to place this on the side of the box. Now, if you wanted this to be on the inside of the box as well as the outside, luckily for me, I've kept this left side material. So we could just place that right inside there and then move the texture locator. We'll be good to go. I just want this on the outside of the box. And since I already have a group with the nutritional panel set up, I can just place that into the nutritional panel material group. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll drag the side pineapple logo group up into the nutritional panel group. And now we need to move the texture locator. So select one of these layers, activate the move tool with the W key. We'll move this over to the side of the box here. All right, we'll move this on down. And we want this around the top left here. And so it's a bit distorted, of course, because it's being projected along the z-axis. And what we want to do is project this along the x-axis. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you do this is that if you had different values on the different axes for the size, say we had a value of, I don't know, we'll say 16 on the z, for example, and we still have 3.5 on the X. And of course, the texture locator looks exactly the same as it just did. But now let's make the projection axis along the X. And you can see it's stretched out, which isn't what we want. This doesn't apply in our case, but it's something to keep in mind. Let's change this back to 3.5. Now we could just set the projection axis to X. And the reason I mention that is because if you did have these different sized values, what you want to do instead of doing a projection along a different axis, what you would do is just rotate the locator itself. So keep that in mind. All right, so now we'll get this in place. And it looks like it's not showing up exactly how we want. And to fix this, it's very simple, really. Just hit world coordinates, and that will snap the image to the world coordinates of our texture locator. So hit that, and now we are good to go. I want to rotate this a little bit to tilt it to the left, like so. Let's drop that tool with the spacebar. We don't want the nutritional panel covered up, so we need to place this group underneath the nutritional panel layers. So put that on the bottom, and now he'll appear underneath. Now it's time to create the pineapple on the cellophane. I've already gone ahead and hidden all the items other than the cellophane. So that way we can focus on just what we're doing with the cellophane item and its materials. Now, what we're going to do as we've done in the past by duplicating one of the previously created groups and locators. So all we need to do is go to the top front group, select the pineapple logo, we'll right click, duplicate. Of course, we're going to have some duplication errors, which are not good, but that's fine for now. We'll just delete the two upper ones that are instances of something else. And then we'll rename this to Cello Pineapple. And we'll remove the logo text from the name. And we'll drag and drop this up to the cellophane material group. We'll keep this on the top for now. Now we need to recreate the bump and speck layers as well as fixing the texture locator. So let's rename the texture locator to Cello Pineapple TLOC. It's renamed it to Cello Pineapple Texture Locator 2, which means we have another one. And I actually recall earlier in the video where we named the one on the sprinkles as cello, which is not what we want. So let's go to the sprinkles one. Make sure, yeah, that's it right there. Sprinkled pineapple TLOC, and then we can collapse that. Let's go back up here and rename this one again to Cello Pineapple TLOC. We also need to make sure that we delete the layer mask for the process node. So select the layer mask and delete that. Now let's right click on the pineapple modos, diffuse layer and create an instance. We'll set this one to specular amount. So under basic, spec amount. And then we'll instance the base image there again. Put this one to the top. And then right click on the effect and set the effect to bump. Now we need to reset up the parameters for each of these two layers. Let's go check out one of our pineapple layers. We can look at the one we duplicated, the pineapple logo. And so again, for the bump, we've got just a low value of 20 set there. So we'll set the low value of 20. And for the spec layer, we have the layer inverted, opacity 2%, low value 50, high value 80. So we'll go and set that again. Okay, now that we have that set up, we also need to recreate the layer mask for the process. So let's right click on the bump layer, we'll duplicate that, drag and drop it onto the process layer. And now we need to make sure we set up the alpha channel to use alpha only. And then under the texture locator, make sure that it's set to edge on horizontal and vertical repeat. So now that we have those materials set up, what we need to do is to move the texture locator down in front of the item for the cellophane. So let's activate the move tool with the texture locator selected. We'll place this down in front like so and move it to the front a bit more. We also want to turn this on so that we can see it. And it looks like we probably need to move it a little bit. And I also want to rotate this so it's tipping more to the left rather than the right. All right, so if you notice that some of the color is actually coming through correctly while the rest of it is very transparent. And the reason that's happening is because of the way that we have this group set up and we have a layer mask on the material. You might recall that we set up the cherry motos as a layer mask for this. So that way the color would punch through without being transparent. Now we need to recreate that effect for the pineapple. So to make that happen, we're actually going to need two materials, one for the cherry and one for the pineapple. So let's select the material for this group, right click, duplicate. Let's rename these so they match what they're being applied to. This one will just be cello cherry matte. And now let's rename the other one to cello pineapple matte. We also need to change the texture locator and image for the layer mask here. So let's go into the properties tab under texture layers. Let's select the pineapple image, go back to the texture layers tab, and then select the correct locator. And it should be the cello pineapple texture locator. Now that we have that set up, what we can do is hide the cherry material and the pineapple should be punching through correctly. Of course, we still see the cherry there because the cherry group is still visible. But we more or less have this set up. But we still need to do one more thing. And since we'll be creating passes to minimize the amount of items we need to keyframe for those passes, we can actually place these materials into the respective groups. So the pineapple material will go into the pineapple, the cherry will go into the cherry group. That said, we also need to make sure that we move the thin film material above those materials and not below. Because if the material is above the thin film material, it will override any settings we have in the thin film material. So let's move this to the top of the group. Now we can place the cello pineapple material into the cello pineapple group, and likewise with the cherry material into the cherry group. We need to make sure that the materials are on the bottom of these groups. Otherwise, of course, they could be overridden. So drag and drop those to the bottom there. And that's it. And we've completed the pineapple for the cellophane. Let's let preview do its thing here. Looking good. We are nearly completed here. And one thing I want to do is to clean up the scene before we actually start setting up our passes. We have quite a few texture locators here. Some are most likely not being used. And without having to parse your entire scene and figure out which ones you are and are not using, there's actually a script that we can use written by Gwen. And it's on the Foundry forums. Here's the thread that you can go to. I'll also have a text file with the URL in it so you can copy and paste it into your browser and easily get to it. And here's the post by Gwen that has the Python script that you can use. So what you can do is copy and paste this text into a file. I named it delete unused tloc's.py. It does need to be a Python script as it says right here it's Python, so it's important to name that .py. And if you just create it, paste it, save it, name it, yada yada, you'll be good. And now what we want to do is to run the script. So inside of Modo, go to System, Run Script, or Shift F5, and we will browse to that. I already have my directory pointed to it. Select it and hit Open, and it looks like it deleted a couple of the texture locators. So we're good to go there. Now I also have one that says Mixed, and by this point, everything should be named. So there's really only one place it could be, and I'm guessing it's something to do with the cardboard material that I set up. So let's go there and check out the texture locator. Ah, yes. Sure enough, it is. So let's rename it to cardboard TLOC. And now we have all of our texture locators named accordingly. It's a little more organized. And we'll also rename the texture locator group. And we'll name this one box TGLOC. That's for our texture group locator. All right, so we've got that a little more organized. And we don't have any unused items in our scene. So let's go ahead and collapse some of these main groups. And we'll keep some of them open. For example, the pineapple and cherry groups that we've created. We want those to be exposed for now because we're about to set up our passes. But before we do so, now we also have some other materials here that we created in the modeling phase that we used to help us with selections. And we actually didn't use any of these in the shading process. If you wanted to keep them, you could just make another group locator as an organizational tool and place all of those in there. And generally, I find that to be a good idea. And that's what I'm going to do here. So let's create another group. And it looks like I made it at the top. Let's bring it on down toward the bottom. We'll call this unused mats. Let's select all of these materials and place them into that group. And now we have that set up, and our scene and shader tree are more or less organized. Now it's time to start creating our render passes. And we'll be creating two passes, one for the cherries and one for the pineapple. Now, if we go to our pineapple pass real quickly, just to show you, the way I created everything has been kind of willy-nilly. And I did that intentionally so that we could mess up our pineapple pass. Because before, you might recall, things were more or less set up exactly how we wanted them for our final render. And now they're all messed up. So we need to fix that. Let's just go back to setup mode. And we'll start with the cherries pass first. We won't create it just yet as a pass, but we will go and set up all of the items we want keyed for that pass. We know that we need to hide all the pineapple items. So let's do that now. Let's select cello pineapple, sprinkled pineapple, and let's move this one to the top. And it looks like under the cello cherries group, the material's turned off. So we'll go and turn that on. Let's unhide all of the items that we want to use for this pass, which is pretty much everything except for the pineapple sprinkle source. And we have one pineapple there on the side panel that we want to hide. So under the nutritional panel group here, let's hide the side pineapple logo group. And now it should be hidden. Okay, we're going to keep all of these expanded out how we have them right now, because we're going to key the visibility of these layers here momentarily. Now let's go ahead and set up the pass. Let's hit new on the pass. And we'll call this cherry. We'll hit OK. Now that we're inside of our new pass, we still need to set up the values inside of this pass. Because if we go to setup mode and edit any of these values, they'll be propagated to this cherry pass if they're not keyed in here. So right off, we want all the pineapple hidden and all the cherry unhidden. So what we'll do is we'll basically just hide and unhide, or unhide and hide certain groups. So for the pineapple, we'll unhide and hide. The cherry will hide, unhide. Repeat for all the pineapple and all the cherry group. All right, so that's it. Make sure you have auto add on and that we hit apply. Now that we've done all of the items in the shader tree that we want, we also need to keyframe the cherry sprinkle source. Now, it's not absolutely necessary, but I think it makes sense to do it because it goes with that pass. So we'll go ahead and do that. So we'll hide it and unhide it. Make sure you hit apply again. And that pass is basically set up. And now if we go to the pineapple pass, we should have most of our settings already completed because we've already done them prior. And that's looking pretty good. Let's make sure that we have all of the cherries hidden, which we still do not. So let's go and key all of the pineapple and cherry layers accordingly. So all the pineapple ones will hide, unhide. All of the cherry ones will hide in this case, since they're already previously visible. We also need to make sure that our background gradients and process layers are keyframed in the right passes. So let's expand our whole box group. Let's save what we've done here in this pass by hitting apply. And we'll go to the cherry pass. And it looks like we have the right gradients and also the process layers correct here. These two process layers. All right, so everything is set for the cherry pass. Everything is set for the pineapple pass. And now all you need to do if you want to render both of these passes out at the same time is to go to the render menu and then hit render passes. This will let you select the pass group you want to render. And as soon as we hit OK, it will start rendering both of those passes. All right, and so our render is complete. And you may notice that there's only one image in the completed renders. And that's because when you render a pass, the passes show up on the top bar here. And of course, the cherry one looks good. Let's check out the pineapple one. And uh-oh, there is a missing logo from the top of the box. Let's go find out why. Okay, let's expand out our group for this. And that should be in the top front logos group under pineapple. All right, so it's immediately noticeable. There's no plus next to the image layers, which means there's no texture locator. Yeah, sure enough, no texture locator. Let's expand the process as well, because we're going to be editing all of the images here with a new texture locator. Now, we've got two ways we could do this. We could add an item in the item list under locators, texture locator, but that would be a complete waste of time since we already have 3 different texture locators with the right settings for the pineapple. So let's just go duplicate one of those. Let's select the one on the front here. And this one's for the pineapple on the front cellophane panel. So with that one selected, let's go to the item list, expand that out. Let's right-click on that, duplicate it. Let's rename it now, so that way it matches what it's doing. And we'll name this TL for top left, pineapple TLOC. Now we can move this up to the top where it belongs. Move that back. We're going to place this just in front of the cherry locators. And we're also going to keep these as rectangles so that we can differentiate the texture locators for the pineapples from the circle locators for the cherries. All right, so we want to keep the projection on the x-axis. We also want to keep the scale for this. All we need to do is to actually rotate this the opposite direction a few degrees, about 19 degrees or so. All right, now that we have that in place, we need to set this as the texture locator for those layers. So let's multi-select them. Let's select the one on the top, hold down the shift key, and select the lowest one. And now with the multi-selected, we can assign this as the texture locator. All right, so under the Properties tab, Texture Layers, under the Locator drop list, let's select the TL Pineapple TLOC. And now that's back in place. However, it still needs moved, so let's select one of the layers, activate the Move tool with the W key, and put this in place. All right, let's let Preview do its thing. That's looking pretty good, but we still have a few things that we need to fix now. And that's because I edited the texture locator in the past. So we might as well just hit apply to keep the changes we've done. And by changes, I mean that we have moved the texture locator. So what we need to do is to set these positions to setup mode. So let's multi-select these channels. Select the top one there, and then hold shift, and then select the lowest channel. So that way you can see we have an orange highlight for all those channels. Let's right-click on one of them, and then hit apply to set up rest value. So now are the default values for that texture locator. All right, one last thing I want to fix is the logo for the pineapple on the front. It's the exact same size as the other ones, but since it's on a curved surface, it's appearing that it's actually being distorted, and it is ever so slightly. So let's compensate with the size on the X and the Z to kind of shrink it down a little bit. Let's reselect that texture locator for that item. And we're not going to edit in the past because we don't want to screw up the path. So let's go to setup mode, and we'll change the value for this to be approximately 3.25 centimeters on the X and the Z. That's going to give us what we want. So let's hit apply. Let's go to the pineapple pass just to check it out. And that's sufficiently squashed enough. All right, let's let preview do its thing again. All right, yeah, that's sufficiently squashed. Now that we have that all set up, both of our passes are complete. What we need to do now is to re-render just this pass, and we can simply do an F9 for that, since we already have our cherry pass completed. Here's our final render of the pineapple. Everything looks pretty good. We now have all of our pineapples where they should be and rendering correctly. And at this point, if you wanted to adjust any of the colors, saturation, or values of the box to brighten it up a little bit, you could use a process layer in Modo, but then you'd have to re-render. The alternative is to use colorways or Photoshop. And that's most likely what I would do, is to use one of those two programs. Otherwise, re-rendering, that can take a while, and you really probably want to avoid that at this point. So that's it for this tutorial. We've covered quite a few things, from render booleans to modeling tools for creating point data to scatter images across a mesh, the layering system of the shader tree, how to use a single image for multiple effects such as specular and bump and so on, and a whole lot more. So I hope you learned a lot and found the video useful. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to post them on the forum. I'll try to answer as promptly as I can. I'm Javis Jones. Thanks for watching.